Hello, everyone. It's my great pleasure today to host Professor Englander, a colleague and a great friend. Professor Englander is an associate professor at Malmo University and associate editor for the Journal of Phenomenological Psychology. His phenomenological research is situated within the interdisciplinary research context of health and society, with an interest in topics such as psychopathology, empathy, and qualitative research methodology, and much more. Is the author of multiple articles on phenomenological psychology and the editor of Phenomenology and the Social Context of Psychiatry. And recently we published together this book, Empathy and Ethics. So, Magnus, thank you for being here. It's a great pleasure for me to have you.
Well, it's an honor to be your guest.
I would like to start from empathy. I mean, I know that you are, as we were saying a few minutes ago, you stretch into different fields of research, and you are very versatile. But I also know that your main focus of research has been empathy for years. What drove you into empathy? Why empathy?
Well, actually, when I finished my PhD on emotional memory, I traveled back, and I actually moved back. I moved from the U.S. I moved back to Sweden, which that's the place where I grew up as a young boy. But then I started to work at Malmo University at the Department of Social Work, teaching psychology there, because I got my degree in psychology, and also my background was in phenomenological psychology. I studied under Amedeo Giorgi, as you know, and so they asked me to at Malmo University, when you teach this course in psychology for those social work students, you have to somehow teach them how to communicate, like communication training, which is part of most psychology.
Why phenomenological psychology? What does it add, the phenomenological?
Well, the thing is that when I started those groups and sort of like communication training, it became sort of like phenomenological psychology in communication with others, interactive. And honestly, I didn't really know what I was doing at the beginning, because I was just, I had to teach something, to survive. And so I was doing this, and I had my master's in counseling psychology. So I remember all those trainings with sort of like Rogerian types of training, where when you record yourself with, and then you transcribe your recordings, and you can sort of like in small groups, you can sort of like train on what you're doing in terms of psychotherapy. But here it was social work students, so it wasn't a matter of psychotherapy. So I asked myself, in what way can I do this? Well, at least I will have to understand something. So that was the idea so let's focus on, see if I can, through those dialogues, they can record and transcribe it. And we were in small groups, and they started to, I'm starting to facilitate, so to speak, them in a sense that, well, are you really understanding now, or are you trying to explain the other, or are you trying to solve the other person's problem? I saw all those tendency. I asked them to understand, but all they did was try to solve the problem or explain. So I said, okay, let's try to understand the other instead. Let's start there. Just stay with them and try to understand, because understanding, that's the beginning of the knowledge of the other in that sense. But we think in the terms of the naturalistic way of thinking always, that we're supposed to explain and also then, the technical sense of solving the other's problem, instead of staying and understanding the other. So after a while, I was just, I came across a couple of articles with Sahabi, actually, and he was writing about empathy, and I was like, whoa, that's what I'm doing.
Okay.
I'm actually teaching them how to reflect on their own empathy. So I'm not teaching empathy, because empathy is where you begin when you when you impress of somebody else. I mean, a lived body in that sense. But I'm teaching them how to reflect on their empathy. So that's how I started. So I didn't mean to start anything new, but so I began. This was in
You did.
2002. 2002. That's like 22 years ago, right?
Wow.
Almost, right? Yeah. Yeah, I'm getting old. so,
All of us.
so yeah. Anyhow, so it's been my new research project since then. So in that sense, it's I had to leave my dissertation behind and just move on to this new thing, because it became. I realized that, wow, this is an insight that is kind of like, I I hate to say pure, but it's a pure sense of getting in touch with your sense of understanding others, in that sense, not doing anything else, only focusing on understanding. And then of course that opens up for other venues, like after a while I was teaching nurses, also the same thing, and other types of all kinds of leaderships and organizations, and I had this phonological approach to empathy training was all over the place. So it's sort of like became what I'm doing, more or less. And also I connected this with the interview situation in qualitative research also, because I noticed that the students that's gone through the training, actually, when I supervised their master's thesis or something else like that, and they did interviews, they did so much better interviews. So I was like, wow, So this was different from the classical Rogerian approach, because the classical Rogerian approach, yeah, it's similar in many ways, of course, and I'm using similar types of pedagogical strategies that Rogers did, but this is more in tune with the phenomenology of empathy in that sense, and the reflection also that goes on, so you can actually adopt a sort of like an empathic attitude, and keep that presence with following the other person's expression of meaning, while at the same time you can also actually reflect. It's kind of like a musician or that can reflect on what they're doing while they're performing. And like also like arts, like dancers or whatever, they can reflect embodiedly while they're performing, but still be completely in tune with the others. So that type of reflection that goes on within the training that I'm trying to teach or facilitate in that sense is actually, in a sense, unique. I would say, yeah. So, yeah.
Since you have so many years of experience, what do you think is the most common hindrance we encounter when we try to empathize with someone? What is the most common problem that prevents us from being empathetic? And should we always be empathetic with the other?
Well, we are empathetic already when we impress into a lived body. So, I mean, the foundation is there. You're already in empathy when you press into somebody else. But we have so many other agendas that we don't pay attention to it. So we skip it. We take it for granted. We go directly to problem solving, explanation, and all those other things and then also you have the mainstream definition of empathy, which is problematic, because it also involves a sense of that you have to care for the other, or be compassionate and sympathetic with the other to be able to understand them. But you can actually understand, of course, and these are the insights from the phenomenologist, of course, that they also can see that if you want to hurt somebody, you could actually you have to understand them well to really hurt them. So that's problematic. But it's also sometimes, if you're in a professional situation, it's not all the time that you agree or feel sympathetic with your clients, or all those things. So but you have to still understand.
So you're saying that
even if
I'm sorry, even if you want to hurt someone, you need to be empathetic, like to emphasize this point.
Exactly. And that goes against the mainstream definition of empathy. So we don't understand empathy the way the phenomenologists understand it, as a basic understanding and following the other lived body or minded creature, as a second person. You're actually focusing on the other, not on yourself.
For the sake of our audience, what is phenomenology? I know that we know what it is, but our audience might not. What do you mean by phenomenology and naturalistic attitude here when you're talking?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. You have a couple of hours. Yeah.
Simple
question. Yeah. No, but to me, in the sense that I'm working in applied phenomenology, it's at least, of course, phenomenology is the study of, it's the logos of phenomena. In that sense, and transcendental into subjectivity, and how subjectivity is constituted. If you want to go all the way to Husserl's sort of like epocase and all those things, taking you there. But in the sense of applied phenomenology, we still in the natural attitude, in the sense that we in the everyday type of world, everyday life world, and we focus on people's lived experience. But instead of perhaps discussing things like intentionality and those things that the noesis and noema and all those things, we're focusing on meanings. That's what we do, because meanings are sort of like depends on intentionality in that sense. So what's the meaning of what you're saying? It becomes important for the psychologist or the social worker or the nurse and all those things. So, and that's also expressed by also applied phenomenologists like Alfred Schutz and his work on in the social phenomenology of the social world. Meanings are something that relates back to the philosophical roots of phenomenology, of course, in terms of consciousness being, there's an internal time consciousness there. It's consciousness is in time, and that's the whole idea of that. Instead of thinking that it's a thing, it's in space, and in the sense of being a substance, and something that we could measure and fix and all those things, that you have to follow the other in time. That's the whole thing also in empathy. So if that makes sense, I think
it does absolutely to me. So when you empathize with someone, you want to understand the meanings, you want to understand what that person means for you, or just what that person means. What do you think?
Well, that's a difficult thing, because it could be like the person, let's say somebody's in denial. They wouldn't know that themselves, right? But the therapist would know it, right? So the meaning would be something for me, but not for the person who's in denial. In that sense, that phenomenon is something that that I'm present to, not the person that I'm trying to understand, right? So that's an example of where is the phenomenon that you are following. What are you trying to follow? Where is that meaning? Is that inside the other person, or is it something that presents itself from the other person's expression? And I would say, and there's also reciprocal aspect of empathy that you also have to take into consideration. It's an interactive thing, and it's not just like a linear thing that's coming from one person, but it could be. I could watch somebody from afar, right, and see that somebody's, for example, sad across the street. That's possible, and that's empathy in that sense, but I'm not like interacting with the other. But it's also, but how can I see that? How can I understand that? It has to be some level of intersubjectivity, what we're talking about also. So empathy in that sense also discloses or like elucidates the sense of our intersubjective connections in that sense. So, and it helps, and I can understand something. I can also say that I can go to a different culture, for example, right? And I'm wondering what they're doing there. I don't understand, but it takes a while, and after a while I might say, oh, now I get it. I know the meaning of that, whatever they're doing, but I didn't get it at the first time. So it takes a while, but the bottom line is that you have to participate, and this is what we're afraid of professionally, but you have to participate in the meaning of the other's expression and whatever comes through. You have to participate in that to be able to see, you know, be able to say, and you have to be part of it too. So you have to sort of like reply in a sense. This is what I'm present to, right? And then you have an interaction about something, right? But it's like a dance, you know. If the client, you know, if we're talking professionally, the client has to lead the dance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but you could be, but you're trying to be present to something together, but the client is sort of like leading that dance in that sense. Although I might see something that the client don't see a meaning, right? So.
What if you are a bad dancer? I mean, what if
yeah,
right, you really don't get the meaning? So you use the example, the great example of belonging to another culture. I think of mental health. When you are with a different mind setting, neurodivergent types, for example. Is empathy still there or not? If you're not the best dancer on the room, in the room.
Well, yeah. I mean, the dancer is just a metaphor, of course. I mean, the training that I developed is a way of approaching that, you know, and you could get in the beginning. I tried to sort of like mechanically, and that will be like weird to say that, but mechanically try to get people to sort of like mechanically respond or reply to the other in the sense to get an interaction going. But of course, the genuineness in the mutually tuning in type of relationship that's required or to be to participate in the other person's personal world, because that's what you're trying to do. You're kind of like an explorer, right? Kind of like an anthropologist, but you're into the personal world of the other in that sense, right? So you explore that and be a participant observer in that sense of in the sense of an anthropologist. But it could be difficult, of course, if, like you said, you know, if you have like if you have clients and, you know, whether it's severe type of psychopathology or other kinds of pathologies, and of course, and that takes, of course, experience. How would you apply this within that context and with those types of clients? So and I'm not a practicing psychologist, so but I know that the people I've trained over the years, over the 20 plus years, I know people who have applied this at work, and they say it makes a lot of difference. And the one study that I did was actually to evaluate the training and to see where does this training appear within the professional situation. And what they all said was it appears when it's sort of like a situation which is not like the everyday situation, but it's like an emotional latent situation where it's, you know, a loaded situation where it's something that's going on. And that's when the training that they start to, okay, I have to focus on the other. I have to follow the other. So, and I have to reflect on what I'm following. So of course, you know, it's like taking away the focus from whatever your profession is. In that sense, also, you have to be a human being following the other human being to see what's going on. And so it's not about solving the other person's problem or understanding everything about the other person, but it's an approach of trying to follow the other person's expression of meaning. So that's the idea. I don't know if that makes sense, but hopefully.
It totally does. I'm thinking of those people, neurodivergent types, for example, who might want to be empathetic, who are empathetic, but their way to follow, their way to be present might register to us in a different way. So we tune in, but in a way that is not immediately recognizable.
Yeah, but it's also have to understand, I think a lot of those problems, I don't think there's any lack of empathy in that sense.
Yeah, exactly.
But it could be too much empathy, I would say. But there's problem in how to communicate and how to sort things out in terms of the communicative situation. So you have to be, and you have, but you as a professional, you can follow that problems and be present to the struggle, and all those things,
Look,
and also back, back back up a little bit, and not pressure that, because you can't dance the same dance as
right,
you dance with somebody else, perhaps,
right.
you have to be, yeah, you have to follow. So the key thing here is to follow the other, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, was there a moment in your life in which you didn't have the energy to be there, to follow others, so that yeah, empathy was a problem for you?
Well, it's if I had clients, in the past when I did my master's, for example, where I actually made some pre-discoveries to this, in the sense that I had clients that had a really hard time expressing themselves, and I was just present. I was like, okay, I have to just follow them, and that's the only thing I can do. I couldn't understand anything they said, for example, and all those things. Clients that had a very difficult time expressing themselves. And so I realized how difficult it was to do this. And but I don't know if you're asking me the personal question. If I
Yeah,
have
and I
problems
remember
with empathy,
how the
I
story
always have
ends.
problems with empathy. It's like no, but empathy, it's already there, right? But it's how to reflect on it, and actually, it's like, you can teach certain things, but doing it yourself is different, right? So,
Right, yeah, that's
and
why.
you have to realize that also, that facilitating something, and you should practice what you preach, and perhaps, it's not, we all human beings, so of course you're not listening all the time.
Yeah, because I mean, especially, I don't know, when you are tired, when your
Yeah.
mind, as you said at the beginning, when you
Mhm.
have so many tasks, your agenda is
Yeah.
full, uh, then you demand empathy from others, from your
Mhm.
close ones, for example. Please understand me. I really don't have.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to be welcomed. I just want to be understood. But at the same time, in that moment, you are the one who is lacking empathy completely, because you
Mhm.
are onto so many things that you really
Exactly.
don't have the strength to be there with your husband, your child, your sister,
Yeah.
whoever. And you are the one that is not available to tune in. It's
Mhm.
I think it's a situation in which we might find ourselves quite. I find myself in this situation quite often, I have to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love doing so
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
things, but then all of a sudden my plate is full,
Mhm.
and I
And of
demand.
course, the people, right? You don't tune in, so because you
Exactly,
know them, so why
exactly.
tune in, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. So that's always a problem. Yeah. So
And
yeah.
how do you come back? I mean, did it ever happen to you? Sometimes I have difficulties to come back to the people I love,
Yeah.
because I feel hurt, even that there's not empathetic connection there. Although, I mean,
Yeah.
I work on empathy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm familiar with the idea, but one thing is to know one thing, another is to live it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we can't be perfect all the time. I mean, that's the way it is. So, and sometimes you don't want somebody to listen carefully either. It's just you
Mm,
just want. So what's what the context demands of something. That's the context is meaning dependent, right? And the
mhm,
meanings are context dependent. So it's the whole idea of also tuning into what kind of context it is. But we'll do that. I think we do that anyway, because empathy is there as soon as you meet somebody else. You can come home and see that somebody's angry at home, right? Or
uh-huh,
irritated or something like that. But of
mhm,
course, I have my dog that meets me, and in the hallway when I get home,
mhm.
who always appreciate me coming home. So
And that warms you up. So,
yeah, yeah.
how do you come back? How do you tune in when it's difficult for you to tune in? How do you manage to?
Well, I think it has something to do actually what they said in the evaluation when the training. Actually, it's you notice that when it's serious, then you have to tune in, right? But
Mm,
how serious is this, right? But sometimes you have to tell yourself that, well, you have to take time also to listen to people, right? And that's important, even though it's not they might be sometimes, the children might be quiet or something, and that could be an expression of that. Maybe you should go in and listen to
mhm,
them. How was your day in school and all those things that.
mhm,
But it's easy also to say, well, nobody's saying anything, so I'm just not going to bother.
mhm,
Everything must be fine, right?
mhm,
And that's a problem also in our society, because we tend to see when there's nothing, there's no emergency, we just leave it, right? But and actually, as you can tell from recovery oriented psychiatry, 95% of the time, that's when you're not spending time in the emergency psychiatric ward, but
mm,
95% of the time, that's when you're not there, and that's where the work has to be done. But we leave that because it's like, oh, it's not an emergency anymore.
mm, mhm,
So I think we have to tell ourselves to be more in tune to when it's quiet and when nothing is happening, and because that's also an expression of meaning
mm.
coming at you.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Beautiful. Yeah. Was there a moment in which things were too quiet in your life? I mean, when you touched a blank slate, you had to start from scratch and uh, find what was there for you. I mean, find the new meanings in your life when you had to restart from scratch.
Well, I started from scratch when I came back to Sweden in
Can you tell us
2002.
your
Yeah, yeah,
story?
yeah,
Because that is
yeah,
interesting also. I mean,
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
left for a specific reason, then you went to
yeah,
the US, you came back
yeah.
because of the
So I
education.
went to study. I went to study in the U.S.
Why?
So I wanted to go to the university, and I wanted to go to the U.S. So I went to the university in
Why?
the
Because
U.S.
I remember they told you that in Sweden they told you that you weren't so cut for university. Maybe the
Oh no, no, yeah,
academia.
exactly. Yeah, we
That,
didn't have
that's interesting
the
also.
the universities in Sweden at that time in the '80s. There weren't that many. I mean, today there's a lot of people going to the universities, just like in the U.S.
Mhm.
But there, it was a selection of the people who had the highest grades and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, well, there's another way of doing this, and that's going to the U.S. And I wanted to go to the U.S. also because it was the '80s,
Um,
right? Yeah, yeah. And so I wanted to go to the U.S. in the '80s, and I wanted to go to the university. I was like, so why don't do both at the same time? So I went there and I studied the whole thing. I went the whole way. I mean, I got my PhD, and then after a while working there for a year after my PhD, I decided to no, I'm probably more of a European than an
mhm,
American. And
mhm,
so I went back. So,
mhm,
but then I had to start from the beginning, and I had no idea what can I do. I didn't even know if I wanted to continue in academia, but I did. I
mhm.
This newly started Malmo University, who just had started. I went in there and I asked for a job and I got it. So it was good. It's a temporary position, of course, and then I had to apply for a more permanent position, but it got me going. So yeah.
How do you think the meanings came? I mean, I know, and stop me if I talk too much. I know that you were very much on your own. I mean, now the way in which you tell us about this looks quite simple. But being in the US, you need the permissions to stay,
Oh yeah, yeah,
which is
yeah,
a big problem. Having a family network that supports you might be important, but you were really your own person. You had to fend for
yeah,
yourself.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, um,
Yeah, it was a struggle, of course.
yeah.
Used to this type of Swedish society that's always has a safety net. It was
Mhm.
a tough time, but I spent the '90s in the U.S., so it was good. It was a good struggle in that sense, but you know, But it was good to come back because I can sense the roots of being sort of like somehow, and I felt more like a European in that sense. Not that I, but when I'm here, I feel more like an American. So it's I don't know. It's like you're never home, right?
So
Kind of like Alfred Schutz,
What
right?
does he say? Tell us.
It's like I'm not going to go into that, but it's more like it's so difficult to come back. If you move somewhere and then you go back, and it's very difficult also because it's like you're never home anywhere. You don't have a home anymore, and you have to accept the two worlds that are sort of like with you all the time.
Yeah, let's talk about that, Magnus, because I have the same exact struggle. What
Yeah.
is home? What do you think? The same for me. I mean, when I come back to
Yeah.
Italy,
Yeah.
it doesn't feel as it used to. When
No.
I'm here, I'm nostalgic about Italy.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
live a bit in Switzerland, and I feel nostalgic even towards Switzerland. How do we build our sense of home? What's home?
Yeah, you have to just, it's in your head, I guess. No,
It's in your head, not in your heart.
no, I don't know, but it's difficult. It's difficult. You have to sort of like accept the two worlds that you have to, be able to and integrate them in the sense that of your sense of who you are, and that integration could be difficult because and this is kind of like personal things, but it's supposed to be, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So but it's like when I wake up in the morning, I wake up in a language also.
Yes.
Yeah. So I wake up in Swedish, and if I'm going to have a talk in English, it's going to be very difficult because I can't find my way to that world. So it's not about, sometimes you can hear that somebody's translating, right? I can tell colleagues, sometimes I help colleagues with their English, right? And I can tell, yeah, that's written in English. It's perfect English, but it's in Swedish because the world, the background or the ground that's written on the expressions are within the Swedish world. So there are two worlds, and that's how I see it. And so so it's difficult in that sense to be in two worlds. So people sometimes ask me, "Can you translate?" And I was like, "No, I can't translate. I have two different worlds, and I'm not very good at translating, and it's just the way it is. And but if I get into that world, I'm in that world, and I'm fluent in this world, in the English, whatever American world. I feel like there's no effort. I'm just, I'm not translating what I'm saying. I'm just in that world. And if I'm in the Swedish world, I'm also in that world. But somehow it's the same person, right? But sometimes I could sense that it wasn't. But I've been here for what, like 22 years almost, so it's integrated.
It's taking over.
In here, but it's still never ever integrated because just like you said, I miss that. I always compare things all the time.
All the time.
Yeah, it's driving everybody around me crazy because it's like, in America, they do this. It's like, and if I would be in America, I would say, in Sweden, they would do it this way. It's so much better.
Yeah.
It's always better, right? So it's just the way
Yeah.
it is.
Nothing is ever good enough, but
No.
then you miss it. It's
Yeah.
weird. And they say
So you have to find a third country, I think.
no, believe me, because I have Switzerland.
No, oh yeah.
It's
Switzerland
the third country, and it had
it wouldn't
some
work
problems.
Yeah, but they didn't have sunshine there. Right? That's the problem.
For example, oh my God, I had to take sun baths to up my mood. Oh
Yeah.
But because they say, home is where your heart is.
Yeah, of course.
But then again, your heart can be in many places. I mean, it's not that your heart is small. The heart can be as big as you can make it. So it's you can't connect home to just one person, for example, or one atmosphere. So yeah, what you said
Mhm.
makes complete sense to me. It's maybe in the accepting that you became this strange mix,
Mhm. Yeah,
and live with that.
yeah, it's a self-acceptance thing,
That's
right? Yeah,
self-accepting.
it sounds like humanistic psychology, but
Exactly. What do you
yeah.
think is the most difficult aspect to accept of yourself? Speaking of self-acceptance.
Well, that would be one of them. Absolutely, accepting the fact that I probably I will, for except for like a conference or two, you can go to the US, but I will never live there. So
Hmm.
that's the difficult thing. It's mourning that, and you have to accept that. And but who knows? You never know what life has,
Throws at you.
to offer, sometimes. But it's that's difficult, yeah.
Would you accept
But
now to put in your heart another country to take and move?
well, right now, it's dark
Uh,
in the afternoon here, right? So it's like everybody around me is speaking of Southern Europe, you know. That's just the way it is. I mean, that's like that every winter. So I think it's a Swedes have, Swedes, I think, will always have a problem accepting winter, especially if you live in the south part of Sweden, because it just, it's not like the four seasons that you see further up north. So it's difficult, but you know,
does music
it's
help?
just the weather, right? But it's important.
But no, it's a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah,
The weather
yeah,
can be also the person. I mean, I'm a different
yeah.
person.
Mm-hmm.
According to the intake of sun I take,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, whether in California, Italy, or Northern Europe, I notice it makes a huge difference in
Yeah, it makes a difference. It does. Yeah, yeah.
I interact.
So,
I
yeah,
see that behind you there's a guitar, and I know
yeah,
that
yeah,
guitar
yeah.
means a lot for you.
Yeah,
Does music help in
yeah. Oh, yeah. It helps so much.
darkness?
Yeah, yeah. I'm playing. I'm playing in two bands right now, and
Ah, wow.
that's what rehearsals. That's sacred
Ah,
in that sense, and it's that helps everything. I mean, music is, in a sense, eidetic, like phenomenology, right, and empirical. So it's very much like phonological psychology in that sense. It's that mix of perhaps being in a certain space that I know, but something that I also that gets me away from academia in that
mm.
sense. I get a sense of I'm not there right now. I'm somewhere else, and it's about emotions, and most of all emotions in that sense,
Do you
and
think?
helps you with reflecting on your emotions too, because you get to perform, and all those things. So it's important.
Do you think that the music can boost our sense of empathy and can create another home for us? What do you think?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I mean, it's right now. It's sort of like, for me, that's the meaning of, that I have, that I'm looking forward for myself. I mean, it's for myself. But I have a family. I have two sons and my wife, and it's, and a dog, and to have some space. You work all the time, as we know. That's life, but have a sense of meditation, almost, right, for yourself, that you can meditate and get into a space where, um, and belong to something else that's almost like, of course, it's bigger than you in that sense.
It's
So it's
bigger than you.
yeah,
That
yeah, it
there's
is.
the
And
part
music
of
is, music is bigger than you. I mean,
it.
it's a sense of playing other people's songs. I mean, that has meaning,
For
that you
example.
partake in, and all those things. And it's not yours, but it's still you doing it. And sometimes when you're performing, you're wondering, you can almost reflect on yourself within that performance. This is me performing it, but I can
Incredible.
see myself in it. It's there are reflections there, within that performing, that's really,
Ah,
it's spiritual in many sense. in the sense that.
Yeah. Because I mean, you are there, coming back to empathy, you are there with this other person who wrote that piece. You understand, not only you understand it, you embody that piece because you are feeling something out of what you are presencing at. And you're participating in that atmosphere, and if you come back, and every piece might create if you want a home, in the sense that it creates it's a little room, it's a little house, it's a little atmosphere where you can come back when you need. It's magical. It is.
And I think it's so important to have that sort of like part of having something like that. It's important. I mean, you can do other things, you could, some people, they dance, or they, or they can, meditate, or, do yoga or whatever, all those things that something that fits you, that's bigger than you, in that sense, that you can also participate in, and you can reflect on that and see that, wow, I'm doing this, but this is not just me doing it. I'm part of something bigger than me. While I'm doing it. And that type of reflection is really interesting, I think, because that's also part of the empathy training, that you reflect on something, on intersubjectivity. That's what you reflect on, actually, in that sense, when that's what's disclosed for you. So and you do that at the same time that you follow the other, you're present to the other. So it's reflection doesn't have to be like reflection and that's intellectual or conceptual or anything like that, but it could be part of an attitude in that sense.
Coming back, reflect, or
you sense the other. Where am I in the sense of the rest of the band members, for example? You have to be present. Of course, the music directs you in that sense, but we all have to be in tune. So it's.
Why do you think we need something bigger than us?
I don't know. This is kind of like, I start to sound like Viktor Frankl or something. It's like you have to have something bigger than yourself, but it's existential stuff. But in the sense that it's, I don't know. Maybe that's the meaning of life.
You know what?
But I took that from Viktor Frankl, so it's not my part. Maybe the meaning of life is just to survive. Who knows?
The meaning
That's
of
what
life.
my dad used to say, at least. He said, I asked my dad what the meaning of life was. He said, it's all about surviving. All the rest is just,
Surviving, biological survival, or good spiritual survival.
Yeah. Both. Depends where you're at in your life, right?
And what does having something bigger than us do to survive?
It gives us a space to I think, to meditate and to be with ourselves, and to do something that that might sound like an individualistic thing to say, but of course we live in an individualistic society, so it might be important for that sense. I might not be the person who created that meaning, but I'm part of it, so I'm part of the society in the sense, and it helps me in that sense.
So you find protection in something bigger than you?
No, I think it's more like joy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about the survival. I mean, in a survival kind of mindset, joy doesn't have much space, does it?
No.
Because you have just to survive, whatever it works, and so on.
No, but I said, what the way I answered that question was my dad.
Okay, so your dad. Okay.
He was born in 1931. He's not alive anymore. But if you asked him, he would say, it's all about surviving, right? So, but
for you,
but in a sense, it's different for me, right? It's probably like, what's the meaning of life is to have something something of your own that's meaningful, and but it's also, I mean, if you ask me what's the meaning of life, of course it's my family. I mean, I wouldn't have anything. That's the background and context of my life. I mean, of course, but if finding something just truly meaningful for yourself, and I think that's a good thing to do for everybody.
For you, the meaning of life is finding meaning in something bigger than your little own. So it doesn't seem so individualistic to me. Is to we come back really to the sense of home and empathy we discussed before. It's connecting to your roots, to this bigger meaning than you.
And music has always been something that comforted me, through my whole life, and it's always been a part of my life. So it's, and then I quit all kinds of music, stuff when I got into academia, because academia was everything, it's like philosophy and literature and all those things. It was great, it's like that was the thing all of a sudden. And then of course, I miss it, because it's something that I kept coming back to, and now it's just like I couldn't live without it, and it was part of growing up. It's like, it's almost like, actually you could say that, because you can as a young person, you can listen to music and you feel understood, right? So empathy doesn't have to go that linear sense of, like, in that sense, it could also be coming from other sources, that you are sort of like within yourself, and you're listening to that and you feel understood by the music. And how can you do that? I mean, it's I mean, that will be taking empathy to a different level, of course, but it's interesting.
But it's a very good point. I mean, feeling understood in music and finding some empathy in music, that's the other side. I think that we discussed that at some point, also in some article. I have the feeling that at some point together we worked on it. Look, it was, as usual, wonderful talking to you, and I got to know new sides of you. Thank you so much for being.
Oh yeah, it's my pleasure to be your guest, Susie.